I went in, I was the first one from my generation that went in the military, from my immediate family. My younger brothers followed me afterwards, and one of my brothers went into the Army, 82nd Airborne here in North Carolina, and my other brother joined the Merchant Navy. So we have a pretty long history of military.
Were you told by Dad that you're going in the military? Or did you make
You
that
know,
decision?
actually I was not. Actually, both sides of my family, my mother lived through World War II, so she definitely knew about war, living in London during 1939, 1940. She was a 10-year-old girl. Dad was, like I said, career military, but the discussions at the dinner table were not about my three boys were going to serve in the military. It was about you have to do what you feel is right for you. Mom was not very supportive of me going in the military because she knew a little bit about what war was about, and Vietnam was pretty well known in 1967. I myself went to college because I wanted to have a career in some other, so I wasn't jumping at going into the military. But sometime around 1968, when I was in college, a lot of my friends were going over to Vietnam or in the service, and I started thinking about, do I want to pursue an education in school, or a lot of my friends were joining the military. So in 1969, I dropped out of school and joined the military, and didn't join the Marines or the Army or the Navy because I'd already known a little bit about the Navy. So I decided, I tried for the Air Force and I got into the Air Force. So I was pretty happy about that.
Your mom was not happy, but what was she like when you told her, I'm going to Vietnam?
Well, actually, my recruiter, when I joined the Air Force, didn't think I would go to Vietnam which she was very happy about that, because of my background in electronics, and he said, you'll probably spend your tour in Europe, which my mother was very happy about because that's where all my relatives were. But during 1969 and 70, there was a lot of things happening in Vietnam, and soldiers were needed more over there than they were in Europe, so I had expectations all through my basic training and tech school that I was going to end up in Europe, but about the 8th week of tech school, they started sending all of us to Vietnam. So I remember the phone call that I made to my mother when I got my orders, or I made to my father and mother, and I don't know, I couldn't see her face on the other side, but I don't think she was happy about that. But at a 19-year-old, I didn't think about danger. I mean, I just told her that it was just going to be a job, and I'll be fine and come home. I had 30 days leave before I left, and I don't remember too much about that leave, but I know I went to Woodstock, which I thought was pretty good, and then that ended, and I was on my way to Vietnam. So I went to Vietnam in November of 1969. That's when I ended up going over there. And it's kind of funny because the guys I went to, when I finally got out to the field, I was telling everybody about Woodstock, and they couldn't believe that I was there back in the August of '69, but I was. So I think, I tell a lot of people, I think when you're faced with danger, you try and minimize the danger to yourself. So I knew I was going to Vietnam, but I always told myself, I don't think I was ever afraid of going to Vietnam, but I always told myself that I'm probably going to be okay because I'm going to be on a base over there, and the other guys will be, doing the other things, and Marines and Army, and I won't have to do all that. So you kind of build yourself that way when you're ready to go somewhere. And for me, when I went to that base over there, I had a special AFSC. I was a ground radio operator, which that word connotates ground radio and doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be on a base. So when I arrived in Vietnam, I reported into my duty sergeant, and he had a map of Vietnam on the wall, and I thought I was going to be on this nice base with concrete driveways and stores and everything, and he had some pins on the map on the wall, and they were all in other areas of Vietnam, and I reported in with one of my buddies, and he said, "So Williams, you're going to be out there at a place called Ham Tam, which is a little fire support base in the jungle." And I said, "Well, that's not what I signed up for. I'm supposed to be here on this base." And he said, "No, your job is to go out there and work with the Army, and you'll be you'll be what we call a forward air controller radio operator. And forward air controllers are, today they're like drones, but back then they were spotter planes, and we had a team of 6 out there that I went ahead and did. So that was what I started to do. So I got on a little Air America plane, left the confines of this big air base, Benoit Air Base, and started flying out into the jungle, and didn't see any bases out there. They were just little tiny holes in the wall, basically. But again, I always said, I'm going to be safe because I'm going to have a lot of Army guys around with me and stuff like that. So that's kind of what we did the whole time. But did an important job over there, and I felt very, very important. My friends back in the States were driving 55 Chevys, and their excitement was going to the drag races, and mine was controlling F1s and F5s. I mean, I was talking to pilots and as they were flying their airplanes, so I thought that was a pretty important job. So that's what the Air Force also did in Vietnam. We did a lot of other things too.
I know historically a lot of people don't realize how much ground support there is with the
Right.
Air Force. And
Right.
the special ops of the Air Force that are out there too.
Well, today, yeah, absolutely. But people, but this group here, when I first joined Air Force, you had air-conditioned barracks back at the, in the rear, and went to the movies every night. And I said, not all of us did that, and a lot of us didn't. And today, obviously, there's a lot of special ops in the Air Force.
What, you had those Army guys around you.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't there for looks. Things got in you were in some tough situations, I'm sure.
Well, I was on a fire support base. So the fire support base was in a place called Tay Ninh, Tay Ninh, Vietnam. And the Army I was supporting was 199th Light Infantry. So their job was to, we were about 20 clicks from Cambodia, and their job was to go and patrol the borders, support we had special forces teams on the borders, so they would be the rear echelon for them. But every day we would have missions, and I would know the missions they were going on, and I'd have aircraft above them protecting them as they went out. And I'd be in a bunker. I had radios in a bunker. I had UHF, VHF, and FM radios that I could be in contact with them. And I felt I had a pretty important job because I was their contact. So I was talking to them all the time they were on the radio, and if they needed any type of support or assistance, I felt I was their first line of defense. And then I would call in, my forward air controller, and he would call in the Air Force or Army, whoever we had. We had artillery. I had Navy artillery off the coast. So anytime I needed any ordnance or anything for those guys, it was pretty. I felt very important. As a 19-year-old kid, I was, had a lot of responsibility. And I took that responsibility seriously. Because I felt lives depended on it, and that's the way we all felt over there.
What was your welcome home like?
I didn't think he wanted to go there, but I was just telling somebody out there. So you're over there for a year, and the only news you have is from the Stars and Stripes. You read every day. Like I said, I went over there right before Cambodia, so the invasion of Cambodia was not taken too well here in the States. We had Kent State, and we had a lot of protest about that. I know a lot about it now, but at the time it happened, there was just a few articles in the Stars and Stripes, and that's the only communications we had. We read about students that were killed, and there was protests, from us going into Cambodia. But to the soldier that was there, I can tell the audience, we needed to go into Cambodia. We saved lives doing that. We saved our own American lives to do that. And I don't think the American people at the time realized, that whether it's right or wrong, the enemy was using the border of Cambodia to kill our soldiers every day. And so the decision to go in there saved a lot of American lives and all that. And so we felt, everybody that was over there felt that it was the right thing to do. When we came home, when I came into Travis Air Force Base in California, expecting to wear my uniform with my medals, and I'm proud of what I have done over there, or at least served my country. And when we got through customs and we got put on a military bus, taking us to, I don't know where it was, might have been San Francisco Airport. It was a little bit a ways from Travis. The whole world changed, because the parades that a lot of us had thought we would see and the welcome homes that we thought we would see was just the opposite. I mean, it seemed like they all focused on military buses. Anything that was OD green or Air Force blue that had military on it, there were lines of people on the streets, and they were not welcoming us. They were throwing I remember little balloons full of, I guess it was red dye, I don't know, they were throwing it at our buses. And most of us were angry, very angry. Most of us were confused, because we didn't know, how we were going to be, treated when we came home. I personally, when I got to San Francisco Airport, I took off my uniform, went into one of the quick shops in there and bought some civilian clothes, and hardly ever wore that uniform again. I mean, I just put it in my duffel bag. I didn't throw it away, but I put it in my duffel bag and traveled as a civilian. That kind of took the uniform off, but it didn't take away how I felt and how I looked. I mean, I'm sure I was as brown as a berry, being over there in that climate for so long, with a crew cut in the middle of the 60s. So I'm sure I stuck out like a plum, basically, saying, well, this is an ex-military guy. But I didn't really get confronted as much as I did when I wore my uniform. So, and never talked much about Vietnam after that. I mean, until many years. I mean, I went through a career, I got married, I had some problems, but I dealt with them and just thought they were normal problems everybody has, and went through a career and had children, and never much thought about it. And then about 12 years ago, or 10 years ago, I met this group here, and it's the first time I wore a hat, because it started talking to the guys, and they said, be proud you were in Vietnam. Don't be ashamed you were in Vietnam. But it's easier to hear that from a bunch of guys that you're with than on your own, basically. Most of us came back and we went into jobs, and very seldom did we, you didn't ask each other if you were Vietnam vets. It's just, that wasn't part of the conversation. It was more about work. So, welcome home means a lot to me now. When I hear welcome home, I often say, where were we at 45 years ago, but thank you for the welcome home now. That's kind of how it is. It's tough. It's tough for a lot of us vets. Especially now, we're all reaching older age, and we see we see a lot of the young veterans coming home. We're so happy for them, but you know, a lot of us wish we could have had the same welcome home. But you know, maybe now maybe that now the country will respect our veterans that are going off to war, because it's not about the individuals as much as it's, I think, as much as I mean, it's not about the cause as much as it is about the individuals. I mean, they're the ones that have to do their stuff, but that's about it.